Toss aside the touchy-feely notions of love in business and recognize the real power it holds. Welcome to the Love is Just Damn Good Business podcast with host Steve Farber. Drawing on his work with a wide variety of companies from the Fortune 100 to smaller family-owned businesses, Farber shares inspiring interviews with business leaders and proven strategies for how you can create experiences that your customers will love by developing a culture that your employees, teammates, and colleagues love working in. Discover why and how love, at the end of the day, is just damn good business for you too. Here's your host, Steve Farber.
Hi there, and welcome to the Love is Just Damn Good Business podcast. I'm your host, Steve Farber. This podcast is brought to you by the Extreme Leadership Institute, which is an incredible coincidence because I'm the CEO and founder of that company. Please come and take a look at what we do at www.extremeleadership.com. Lots of great resources there for you to draw from in your own extreme leadership journey and discovering just what the hell we mean by love is just damn good business. Today, my guest is Mia Kyricos, who is a pioneer in the field of well-being in the corporate world. So I'm going to read you a little bit from her bio. Mia and I are just getting to know each other, so I'm going to use my cheat sheet here a little bit. So pardon me for reading just for a few minutes. And then I promise we'll just talk. Mia is a globally respected thought leader with 25 plus years of cultivating wellness, hospitality, lifestyle, and travel brands across 100 plus countries. She's the president and founder of Kyricos and Associates, LLC, a strategic advisory and referral firm. And she provides brand strategy, business development, operational insight, enabling public and private entities to thrive in the 4.5, and I'm guessing T stands for trillion, global wellness economy. This is what she's doing, but before her going back into her own consultancy, she was the senior vice president and global head of Wellbeing at Hyatt, serving a new hospitality industry standard as the leader and curator of the company's global well-being strategy, spanning commercial health and wellness-related products, services, and partnerships, as well as colleague well-being worldwide. Prior to Hyatt, she was chief brand officer of Spa Finder Wellness, Inc., where she led the company's brand evolution, positioning Spa Finder as the global authority on wellness providers and resources. And she's won all kinds of accolades and awards. 2019's Leading Woman in Wellness and Cornell University's Alumna of the Year. She's been featured all over New York Times, LA Times, CNN, Smart Money, Hotel Business, Travel Weekly, Lodging, Real Simple, Market Watch, and more. And I discovered Mia. That's not true. I didn't discover Mia. I discovered Mia for myself when she wrote a fabulous article on LinkedIn about love in business that kind of brought us together around this conversation. And now here we are. It's my great pleasure to welcome Mia to the show.
Thank you, Steve. I'm super happy to be here. What an honor to be on this podcast. You might not know this, but you're one of my heroes in this world. And so when I got the invitation to join, I said, what do I need to move to be there? Because you're doing such great work. So thanks for having me.
Well, thank you. It's very nice of you to say. I'd be curious to know why that is. Listen, let me just explain why I'm asking the question.
Sure.
It's like, well, you just called me your hero. That's nice. Would you please puff up my ego a little more? That's not why I'm asking. I'm genuinely curious. It makes me squirm a little bit when I hear that. I'm gratified by it. I'll say thank you for that. But why? It has nothing to do with me personally, because obviously we've never really met before.
Right. No, it's because I think it takes enormous courage to put out a book with the 4-letter word of love, because it's not something that corporate America is yet really accustomed to talking about. And, this time that we've all been in, this quarantine time, the way I pull myself out of any sort of, emotional, personal trauma or challenges is to learn something new. And love as a business strategy has been at the top of my list. And 2020, that's been the one gift it's given me, is to really dig deep and research companies and others. And when I came across your book, it gave me the courage to go on, because I thought, geez, I'm not the only one talking about this. There's been great evidence of this, that this isn't just lip service and moving on, that it can be something that feels good but does good for communities and businesses. And I've always had this theory, and reading your book really just helped to nudge me along with my own work and research. And I'm a love passionista, we'll just say that. And I think you are too, which makes me happy. So I'm thrilled that you exist, really.
Well, thank you. I didn't make this up either, and I'm certainly not the first one to talk about it. The first book with love in the title, the first business book, I should say, that I recall was in, I'm going to guess it was around 2003 or 1, 2, 3, somewhere around there. Love is the Killer App by Tim Sanders. And there were a couple. Love Marks was one, and then I wrote The Radical Leap, my first book. It came out in its first edition in 2004, and LEAP stands for Love, Energy, Audacity, and Proof. So I've been writing about it for a long time, but this is the first time I slapped it on a cover. But my point is that this conversation has been going on for a long time, and I think you're right. There is a tendency for people who haven't really given it much thought, to dismiss it out of hand as, I like to say, California touchy-feely hoo-ha crap.
Well, and I think, and I couldn't agree with you more, I actually think the conversation's been happening for quite some time. We just haven't used the term love. When you think about the work of Barbara Fredrickson with her work with positivity and love being a huge form of that, I started mapping things back to 2002, 2003 in my research with Prudential and other examples out there. And it's still something, I think it's the term that people are just not comfortable in their own skin bringing into a business environment. There's still this sort of invisible wall that you need to break through to be able to talk about love. And I think the only way, this is probably work of your Leadership Institute, but the only way that we can bring our whole selves and be human at work, love has to be part of that proposition on a personal level. But I love it when it becomes a business proposition as well. It's the same reason why I'm so passionate about the business of wellness and well-being, because not only is it good for people, planet, and community, but it actually pays. And I found love to be a parallel to that.
So this has been your business journey, is wellness and well-being for some huge brands, and you've had quite an influence on a lot of people in a real kind of frontier area, I think, as far as business goes. Tell us a little bit about how you got set on that path.
It was a transformational moment for me. I will tell you, we've all taken lots of different assessments, leadership assessments, managerial assessments, and love would come up as a character strength of mine. But I was uncomfortable about that. So I put that on the shelf. So I'm just putting that on the shelf for a while. But to answer your question about wellness and well-being, it happened at 9/11. I went back to grad school. I went to Cornell to get my master's in hospitality administration, which is really an MBA for service. And when I went back to school, I had worked in hotels, restaurants, private clubs, all different aspects of service and hospitality. And I was very passionate about trying to find a way to really have my business and personal ideals better align. And I get to campus thinking I'm going to be this crazy person that takes 2 years to get this degree. And 9/11 happened, and it just shook me to the core. I was with classmates that lost family members. I Nothing really seemed all that important. Everything I ever loved was in the spirit of service and hospitality in terms of, job and career mode, but I felt like I needed work with greater meaning. And that's when I decided to pursue this area of hospitality and service that people didn't really study very much, which was spas and wellness and hospitality. And that really brought me to really understanding how we can live richer, more meaningful quality of lives, extend our longevity, and really care for people and planet all mixed into one. That started me on the path and was about 20 years ago. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So hospitality, you were drawn to hospitality just by your nature. And I've noticed a lot of people in the hospitality industry, fortunately, have a similar story, right? If you just look at the word hospitality.
Hospitality, yes.
It's like you would hope that the word healthcare would draw a similar characteristic of people. And in my experience, it does for the most part. There's always exceptions. So you were drawn to hospitality because of that just acknowledgement in just the way that you're made up as a human being. But then you brought it into a specific focus around wellness and well-being in the context of hospitality.
Yes.
So you really focused it in. And
yes.
So what was the first experience that you had in really being able to roll out a wellness and well-being strategy on a large scale?
Well, I got my first project was actually when I was between my first year and second year of grad school, working with the founders of Canyon Ranch Health Resort. And that's when I learned about integrative health and wellness. And yes, they had a hotel, and yes, they had spa services, but they had this unknown business unit around health and healing. And it was all about how you live your life, mentally, physically, spiritually, how those pieces go hand in hand. And it was the first time I'd been in an environment that didn't just include a general manager or front desk operator or a restaurant manager or food and beverage director. It also included doctors and nutritionists and behavioral psychologists, and really looking at things much more holistically than I'd ever seen in a business setting. And so job number one was to help better articulate the unknown aspect of their brand, the health and healing side, to attract people to not just a great place to stay and get luxury service or work out, but to really look at their holistic health and well-being and help them better position that. And that sort of started me to really understanding my functional expertise of marketing and brand strategy and communications, helping people tell their stories in the wellness and well-being space and deliver great service, which is, obviously at the heart of hospitality. So that launched it and took me to several other places, including Starwood Hotels, and developing their spa brands before they were sold to Marriott. And then taking a different stab at this, which really led me to the corporate work, which was another sort of pivotal moment. And that was going to a company called Exos. They were formerly known as Athletes Performance. They trained the world's best athletes, NBA, PGA, NFL, all your favorite athletes. But their intellectual property was around movement, nutrition, mindset, and recovery. So it was a real holistic strategy. And they would bring that on the corporate campuses of Fortune 500 companies. And they asked me to help launch that division and really get a sense of what corporations are grappling with and what us as colleagues, as employees, as humans at work, and how to bring that together more successfully, really impact their quality of life, their health and wellness at work.
So Exos started out by doing that for high-level athletes.
Yes.
They saw an opportunity, said, let's help business people do that as well.
Yes.
And then they asked you to help them bring that into a corporate environment. So if I'm hearing this right, is this the first time that you had the opportunity to apply the whole wellness and well-being approach internally to a culture of a company versus a product offering to guests?
Yes. Perfect. Nail on the head, Steve. That was perfect. It was a real opportunity to sort of look at multiple stakeholders and bring them together. Really understand that when corporations first started talking about workplace wellness, let's make no mistake, it was to reduce their healthcare costs.
Sure.
Because the cost of an unhealthy workforce, stressed out workforce, obese workforce, you name it, was basically negatively impacting their bottom line, and they wanted programs to be able to turn that around. Then you had people, I'm going to say consumers, their colleagues at work that were trying to manage the stresses of how we work today, and also take care of themselves with a little suspicious behavior. A company that's starting to advocate for you to work out or lose weight or stop smoking starts to develop a lot of, untrust in some areas.
Why do you think that is?
Because this is a classic case in point, and something I would teach to anyone, which is we've gotten a lot smarter at being able to tell the difference between motivations that are really about checking the box to make sure wellness gets brought into the workplace versus a culture of well-being. So one is the what and one is the how. And I think early on, and I don't know this now, this is the blessing of hindsight 2020, when I look back at engagements that were successful versus those that weren't, the distinction came right down to who's supporting this at the top, and are they trying to check the box and cross their fingers that somehow they're going to save costs down the road? Or who's the executive sponsor of this that really wants to change how people work and culturally how they feel in the workplace? And depending where they were on that spectrum, you would drive the engagement of the colleagues that were involved. Are they already in a workplace where they feel trusted and it's a two-way street? Or if they were in a workplace where they felt less trusting, you and I both know it's hard to build upon that. And so it really just, I would say what Exos taught me and the gift that it gave me, and if they ever listen, I love these guys, they taught me the power of bringing that kind of thinking into an organization, but it gave me this petri dish to learn about why and why not workplace wellness programs at the time could be successful. And I say programs because they were programs at the time, and it was only later in life, most recently at Hyatt, where I started talking much more overtly about culture, of which that would be a part.
Well, there is no better place to study culture than in a petri dish.
Yes,
of course.
Exactly. But I'm bummed. I got it.
I believe that's where it comes from.
Uh-huh.
But so what I'm hearing you say is the difference between those initiatives that were successful or not was really a question of authenticity on the part of the leaders.
Yes.
So how, from your perspective, how would you know that in situation A, it was the people, as you say, checking the boxes because we're trying to reduce our healthcare costs, so let's see if we can get these people in shape, versus scenario B, which is I care about these people, I want them to have a great experience working here, and all the good stuff will fall out of that naturally. How would you know the difference between those motivations?
It really comes down to, so much of this is not going to be paper and pencil. It's going to be gut feel. When you walk into an organization, a storefront, a store, a difference between perhaps a Whole Foods or your neighborhood five and dime, whatever it is, it's like you don't always know the criteria, but you know it when you experience it. For me, it took me a long time. I'm still a student of this, but it took me a long time to ask the right questions about how people work. Too often when we're interviewing, when we're, getting to know prospective clients, whether we're, trying to partner with an organization, we're so focused on the what, their products, their services, and so forth. We don't ask enough questions about how they work. And that's where their commitment and passion to wellness and well-being, the how, which is really what are the intrinsic motivators of why people are in the businesses that they are, and really asking the why behind what they do and then how they do it. And the what, I think over time, it's become less and less important, at least to me, whether I'm working for an organization, whether I'm advising an organization. That's how you tell the difference, is really getting a sense of the why they're in the work that they're doing. And it's pretty easy, I think, now to really distinguish between people that are in there because they want to drive revenues and profits versus changing the world in some way or leaving it off a little better. And typically, those are the ones that also want to drive transformational cultures, the places where you really just want to work and be, you need to be, and that's really an important distinction.
I think one of the reasons the why question is so powerful is because of the nature of the question itself. If I ask you why you feel strongly about something, if I ask you questions that are going to give me more insight into what makes you tick, essentially what I'm saying by asking the question is I care about you.
Yes.
And it's a very short little baby step from care to love. And if I'm coming from the perspective of I want your experience of working here to be fantastic because I'm grateful for you. I love the work that you're doing. I want you to do better work, certainly. And I want all of us to create an environment where we're helping each other. Then it ties in with, so tell me about yourself. Let me make sure that I'm doing that right. Let me make sure that I'm creating the right kind of environment for you. I can't do that in a vacuum. I mean, I can, to your point, I can say, well, if people are more physically fit, if we establish a policy where we encourage people to get out of the office and take a walk several times a day, then these things will happen. Sure, but it's coming from a very different place.
Right. And, I had plenty of engagements early on in my career. Access is a great example where you have people that have signed up for the program. They've been incentivized to participate through cash or the promise of trips, you name it. But they feel so uncomfortable to be away from their desk for the hour that they've put in Outlook to take care of themselves, right? That's when it doesn't matter all the money in the world that we throw at them. It's never going to actually manifest into anything meaningful. You just hit the nail on the head. One of the most, for me, when I learn something, I have to, personalize it so I can rectify it. One of the greatest learnings I loved in doing a lot of this research and really starting to advocate for love as a business strategy was about care. And I mapped it back to, I grew up on the coast of Maine. I worked in hotels, restaurants, private clubs, and put myself through school that way. And I had friends that did the same thing, but they clocked in and clocked out. For me, I was excited about making someone's 25th wedding anniversary special, or thinking of a way that I could uniquely celebrate someone's birthday or whatever as part of serving them. That wasn't, I look back now and I realize, God, I loved my job. And so I say a lot, when I think about love and care, you can care for people that you do not love, but if you love to care and that's genuinely something that you're passionate about, you can change the world, and so that whole distinction on people that genuinely care for people and in service of people, which gives me one of my favorite things that I got out of your book, Steve, which was, where I'm going, but that, I think you synthesized it for me.
How did I do that?
I call it the new ROI, reciprocity on investment. I thought that was one of the most profoundly simple but impactful terms when you think about reciprocity instead of return. Because to me, that's the heart of hospitality. It's the heart of people that really want to transform your wellness and well-being. It's literally from an authentic place. When you love to serve, that love comes back to you in your business. And I never
say around here, as we say around here, do what you love in the service of people who love what you do.
Exactly.
But if I could quote you for a moment, I just want to repeat what you just said in your words. You can care for those you do not love, but if you love to care, that stands to be exponential. Right?
Exactly.
You can care for those you do not love, but if you love to care, your results are going to be incredible. You care for those you do not love, but if you love to care, ...
Yes.
That's really brilliant, and it's so true, and it speaks right to one of the big challenges that I hear from people when I encourage folks to ask the question, for example, why do you love the people you work with? Why do you love your colleagues? Why do you love your employees? Why do you love your customers? Why do you love your clients? Why do you love your guests? Whatever the terminology is. And it's a great place to start. But what if the answer to that is, well, I don't?
Oh.
Okay. Well, is it unrealistic to ask people to genuinely love everybody they work with? Maybe. But I don't have to love people in order to care for them.
Yeah.
I can still care for you. And I'm caring for you because I love that aspect of the human experience.
Yeah.
And so back to the question about kind of a transactional versus a relationship approach to a wellness culture. If the employer is doing it because they genuinely care about their employees, they're going to be much more likely to take advantage. The employees are going to be much more likely to take advantage of the opportunities given them because then they want to. They don't feel like they're being forced to. They want to because you care about me. I'm going to reciprocate. I'm going to care about you, and maybe I'll even be more likely to care about myself. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing?
Yes. That's I was doing this masterclass last week for the Global Wellness Institute, and that actually came up, the relationship between being able to execute love as a business strategy, institutionalize it, right? And there's lots of different ways to do that, and it takes courage. But what happens, what's the relationship to self-care and love and all of those things? And this woman, there was about 820 people that dialed in. There were 73 countries. It was completely wild to see the engagement. And this woman asked the question, what happens if you are struggling with you work for a company that you love, but you're struggling with your boss, like it's an untrusted, uncomfortable relationship. And I'm like, the clock is ticking on that wall. That is just, it doesn't matter. And then she said, but how do I deal with that? How do I deal with someone who clearly doesn't love me and might not love him or herself? And I said, it's hard. You got to dig deep and find the empathy meter and sit there and take for a moment, much like, when they said, imagine the person in the audience that's got his underwear on, or imagine you're treating someone like who's a patient. Really studying this helped me realize those people that don't care about themselves or don't have a good relationship with themselves, or they themselves feel unloved, are the hardest people to have meaningful relationships with, whether personal or professional. It's destined to fail because of that. And it was just such a courageous question, I thought, because this woman basically works for a company that she absolutely loves. She is the biggest advocate for their products and services, but she is struggling daily with a boss that clearly she doesn't feel the love and doesn't think he feels the love, right?
Yeah.
So there's so much really interesting.
Yeah, it is really interesting. There's so much research, over the years on this that I think it's generally, that's the word. I was trying to combine general and genuine. Fairly agreed upon idea that people don't quit their company, they quit their boss.
Yep.
So your relationship with the person that you work for it colors everything else. Now, if you turn that around, what it means for us, what it means for anybody who's in a leadership role, we can't underestimate the impact that we have on the people around us.
Right.
And if it's true that people quit their boss and not their company, if you work in an organization where you don't really love the culture and you don't love the product and the service, I can still have a tremendous experience if I love my team.
Right.
So we have this incredible influence, far more than we give ourselves credit for. And back to the question at hand, if I don't have that image of myself as a person in whatever role, whether it's leader or otherwise, that I have that self-love, that confidence, I'm not going to take a stand counter to the status quo of the culture around me, because I'm just I'm too afraid to.
Right.
So what did you give her any prescriptive advice in all of this?
I said a short-term and a longer-term solution. And the short-term solution was to survive that relationship for the time being, was to really look at him with empathy. This is someone not to be angry with or disgusted with, but really to have empathy for, because how sad and lonely it must be for them to live in a world without love, right? So we had that conversation. And then I was very honest and said, that does not have staying power. I mean, it really is a matter of contemplating, is there a way you can shift jobs within your organization if you love them, and start interviewing your future bosses, and really had that conversation. Because
I think that's great advice. It gets back to, I may not love you, but I can care about you, and tapping into allowing myself to be empathetic is one way of caring, right? Isn't that what empathy is on some level? I mean, without getting into the semantics of it, of course. But the other thing that I find is many times, not always, but many times, that disconnect happens because for whatever reason, we don't really know each other as human beings. So a good question for her could be, how much do you know about this person? What's going on with this person's life, their challenges, their family, their dreams, their aspirations? And sometimes it's just a matter of sitting down and saying, you know what, let's just have a cup of coffee. Remember when we used to be able to do that, sit down with somebody and have a cup of coffee?
Exactly. God forbid.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
It's hard to drink through a mask. But just to get that time with no agenda other than, let's get to know each other a little better.
Yes. Yes.
And that gives me a better sense of well-being.
Yes.
When I come to work.
Yeah.
So what is the distinction, or is there a distinction between wellness and well-being?
There's a lot of academic answers to this question, but I'm going to give you the human straight up Mia one. I see, this is something I really think that wellness is the steps you take to take care of your health every single day, whether it's to eat better, sleep more, whatever. Care about the people that your relationships with, the list goes on. And well-being is that destination we're always trying to get to, that like mirage in the desert, that we don't get to stay for long often. So to me, wellness is a means to well-being, but there's a lot of things both within and outside of your control that affects your well-being, right? So I look at wellness as the things you can control, and well-being is dependent on many other factors like the weather, politics, the environment, COVID-19, you name it. And so we're trying to basically get to the promised land of well-being. So that's how I look at it. It's really it's that moment in time that might come on a Saturday at like 2:00 in the afternoon, where you feel like your physical well-being, your mental well-being, your emotional well-being, your spiritual well-being, like in terms of purpose, and it's just aligned all at once, and you're just feeling that moment of just. And I think that's what we're trying to do every day. And it gets hard. It's hard in times like these. You have to make a concerted effort to make your well-being a priority. And there's lots of different ways to do that, and it's different for each person. Yeah,
and it's a very personal definition of what that means. So simply put, the higher your level of measurable wellness, the greater opportunity you have to experience more and more well-being.
Perfect.
Right?
Exactly.
So I'm curious about your experience at Hyatt.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that journey. You were there for how long?
A couple years until COVID got in our way. But it was an amazing experience because it was the first time a position had been created that really looked at a vision for wellness and well-being that was both commercially focused, but also internally focused. Typically, those two functions, right, are separate. One belongs in the HR world, looking at colleague health and well-being. And then if a company has consumer-based products and services, there's a different leader for that. And so I worked really closely with the CEO, the chief commercial officer, and the chief HR officer to create this position where we could come up with one vision, one strategy that would be good internally and externally. And I think that really resonated in the marketplace and really was the best culmination of anything I imagined doing career-wise, and they actually talked me out of my consultancy for those 2 years because of this effort to make it such a huge priority.
So it was really the coming together of a couple of different parts of your journey, it sounds like, because you were in wellness and well-being as a product offering, let's say, and then you worked on the cultural side, the internal side.
Yes.
And then at Hyatt, it was, we want to offer this for our guests, but we also need to apply it to ourselves.
Yes, and I have to give Hyatt, what I would say Hyatt had a leg up, I would say, and I've either worked for or advised most all the big players in the hospitality space. What I think uniquely positioned Hyatt to make this commitment to wellness and well-being was their purpose of care. They have a very simple purpose. They've rolled it out 5 years ago. If you care for people, we care for people so that they can be their best. So the way I looked at it, that was well-being is the ultimate realization of their purpose. If you're in that moment of time where you're at your best, you've achieved well-being. And so when you could tie the commitment to wellness and well-being to a company's purpose, and there's lots of ways to do that, I think you stand to set yourself apart. And I think Hyatt did just that.
And did they take the same level of commitment? Do they make the same level of commitment to that internally in terms of their own employees and the way they operate as an organization as they did to what they're offering their guests?
I think they made great strides to do so. I mean, this is something you lay bricks and it takes many years to realize. But I will say, to no fault of Hyatt, and I would say this is common in terms of big business and Fortune 500 companies today, that they are in the midst of shifting from that check the box culture to that raison d'etre, if you will. Right. I learned a lot from customers with which we work. So customers that host meetings at hotels, for example, big companies like PwC and Deloitte and Nike and others. It's been really interesting in the last 2 to 3 years watching them prioritize wellness and well-being, watching them establish new positions, chief well-being officers, SVPs of well-being, and so forth. And I do think people are starting to learn the language, but it's a start. We still have more work to do. But I find the future very promising because I think what 2020 will do is accelerate this growth because we've had no choice but to get real and to get human at work. 1 week you're all working happily and everyone ended up going home and corporate offices shut down and so forth. And suddenly you're on Zoom. And if you weren't used to that before, the dog's running by, the kid's running by, you're homeschooling, you got to make a meeting. You have a terrible workspace because you didn't have to work from home before. I mean, there's all of these things that are happening and our humanity, good, bad, and different, are hanging out there.
Yes.
So this is forcing, I think 2020 will force organizations to think differently about how they work. And it's not, I think this will serve as a catalyst to move us beyond, let's just offer weight loss or smoking cessation or put a gym at work or, give them access to Headspace or Calm. let's get real about bringing our whole selves to work, which is going to be at home for a while.
Yeah, I don't want to give the impression that I'm a fan of this pandemic. Yes, I am obviously not. And I'm going a little bit stir crazy myself. But I will say this. What you just said, I'm seeing over and over again. I think we're all experiencing it. Now more than ever, we're hearing the words now more than ever. And I've talked about this on previous podcasts. I might be repeating myself a little bit, but now more than ever, people need connection. They need support. They need compassion. They need the feeling, because they're physically isolated, they need the feeling that there's somebody looking out for them. We know that we want well-being when the world seems to conspire against our having it.
Yes.
And so it's bringing this idea into the context of this is what we need now. And of course, what's so fascinating about that to me, and what I like about what's happening here, is that it's always been true. It's not suddenly true where it wasn't before. It's just that now we have to face it. Like you said, we have to look it in the eye and ask ourselves, what do we do to care for each other now and later? And let's use this as a foundation to establish that when we can actually go back to work, for those people, those of us who work in offices or travel a lot or hang out with other living, breathing human beings, we could really come into that having made a lot of progress through this time.
Yes. And I think about that woman who asked that question because she was struggling with her boss. I think it all is going to shake out. The reality is there are people that are in positions of having to care even more. I mean, we all can, but the reality is this has been teaching us what we're good at, what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing. Many of us have been in roles or jobs or working for companies, that comes down to fit's not a good fit. Well, that's going to come out in the wash, and how we work and how we treat each other. The kinds of conversations we might not have tolerated in the boardroom are now going to be front and center, because it's amazing what happens when your focus is not just on what the dividend payout's going to be, but it's on surviving. It's taking steps to ensure that you have a future, not what the future is going to look like, right? And so to me, that's some of the blessings in disguise, like all of the vaporware that has been around us, or, there's no way to fake this. And I think that's one of the gifts of 2020 is really being reminded on a personal level what's important to us. And then, part of that is how and where we work and what we do. And one thing I keep hearing in podcasts and articles and everything is for some people, they've looked at what they do and they've found no meaning in it. And they're like, I need to do work with greater purpose. Or I've been focused on something that I might lose. And I guess what? I don't really care about it.
I'd rather not go back to work because
I'd rather not go back to work,
or
I'd rather not go back to the office, or hey, I was that idiot commuting an hour and a half each way, and this forced us into figuring out how to work remotely when my boss hated that idea before, and now we're actually working better. So what's going on? And oh, by the way, do we need the office? Right? So there's just, I think, healthy dialogue that's being forced, and healthy self-realization, whether personally or professionally, or as I like to say, holistically, because no one checks the fact that they're a mom, a daughter, a sister, a brother, a community member at the door before they walk into the office. It's just now we're more comfortable talking about all those pieces because they've been forced front and center.
Because we're sitting in each other's living room.
Exactly. Like, I've never met you before and I wish I could pour you a cup of coffee, right? Like, that's just, we're getting real. And I think that's a real gift of C19.
Yeah, I agree. So as we bring this in for a landing, I noticed you in your wonderful article, and I'll put a link to the article in the show notes and the blog post. your article on LinkedIn about love and business, you also made a reference to Tina Turner, of course.
Of course.
That line has to come up. And it is the great, funnily enough, the great business question of our time. What's love got to do with it? So if you had to summarize, all of the research that you've been doing and this incredible career that you've had and are engaged in now, and the people that you've met and the experiences along the way, how could you summarize your answer to that Tina Turner question? What's love got to do with it?
It'd be very simple. I would say a whole hell of a lot, more so than I ever imagined. I really do believe that we can institutionalize love as a business strategy. I think there's evidence, and I will say, I went down this path with wellness and well-being. People don't realize this wellness economy that you spoke about at the beginning is a $4.5 trillion economy that's 3 times the size of the global pharmaceutical industry. For me to believe in wellness and well-being, I needed to see the science and evidence behind it and how it could impact business. I now have had that exact experience, as I said, with love. It prepared me for this, because when you look at the ways in which you can bring love to the forefront, and that starts with being comfortable to say that 4-letter word, you really can stand to make much greater impact. So I would encourage people to look at their management strategies. I would encourage people to ask themselves very realistically, are you starting every meeting with what the challenges are to solve versus the things that are going well? Do you have the courage to ask all your stakeholders, your board members, your consumers, your partners, what they love about you? Because only then will you be trusted enough to ask, what don't you love about me or my company? And I think by trying to institutionalize love, I say you can only build the house of love on a foundation of trust. And a lot of people might find that they're not as trusted as they'd like to be. So all of that are good questions to ask, that we should have the courage to ask. And it starts with saying the 4-letter word, and it's okay. It's okay to love in business, just as it is to life. And it's one being now. How we work, how we live, who we are. It's one person, it's one company, it's one product, one service that all comes together in the name of love. So I hugely believe in it, and I will say, just like Tina asked, what's love got to do with it? John Bon Jovi said, you give love a bad name, right? And so you can't, I kind of giggle about this, but I even mentioned this last week. Don't fool yourselves in thinking that you could wake up tomorrow and be like, we're all about love, woohoo! We're all about love, let's do this. I say, if I can be sort of flippant on your podcast, you can't give it up in one night. You have to lay crumbs. You got to romance the love. You got to start with the one place you're going to start, which I find it's asking your colleagues, your customers, what they love about you. Have the courage to ask what they don't love, and start looking at management practices that celebrate love as a leadership practice. It brings you to positivity and all of these things. There's so much science and evidence behind this. That we can't underestimate this. This doesn't feel good, it does good. And I think that's what we really need to focus on together as we climb our way out of 2020.
Wow, beautifully summarized. Thank you, Mia. This has been fantastic. So for people who would like to stay in touch with you, learn more about what you're doing, tell you how much they love you, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. They can find me on Twitter. It's really simple. Mia Kyricos or at @mkyricos. You can also find me at kyricos.com. I'm there, and I always say it might take me a little while to get back to you, but I always will get back to you. I promise that, in the spirit of love and business.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks for listening, folks. And until next time, remember, of course, to do the best you can, to do what you love in the service of people who love what you do. Right, Mia?
Yes, right. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Love is Just Damn Good Business with Steve Farber. Join us again next time, because when customer and employee satisfaction just isn't enough anymore, we are here to back you up with specific ideas to operationalize love to make an enormous difference in your business, personal life, and the world around you. Visit our website at stevefarber.com to leave a review. And don't forget to share the love with your colleagues and friends, because after all, it's just damn good business.